country's sake. Okay, so we're going to listen to both sides. They've got 2 minutes each to present their cases. If you do have questions, and I hope you do, save those till the end. And if you put your hand up for a question, I'll pass the microphone around and you can fire a question down to the panel and they will attempt to answer it. Okay? So, over to you. This is the Brexit. These are the ones who want to leave the European Union. So introduce yourselves.
I'm Thomas.
I'm Ben.
Okay. So they're the Brexiters, and these are the Remainers.
I'm Madison. I'm Paris. I'm Carter.
Okay, so I think we'll start with the Brexiters first to put your case forward. So you have 2 minutes. I'm going to time it. Okay, if you go over it, I'm going to put you dead. Okay, over to you.
We've got a lot to talk about, but we'd like to start off with the £350 million a week that we spend to stay in the EU. We get less than half that money back, and £350 million could be a new hospital every week.
We could also have tighter borders to stop so many people coming in the EU. If we stay in the EU, 350,000 people a year until 2030 could come in without any visa.
If we leave the EU as well, we could lower taxes and raise the salaries because we're spending less money and we can keep that money to ourselves then.
We think the EU needs Britain more than Britain needs the EU. And if we leave the EU, power will be brought back to the UK, as the EU can overrule the UK High Court.
If we stay in the EU, there's more chance of terrorists being able to enter our country, and because as we're part of the EU, it's more free. You can move freely around any other countries in the EU with just a passport.
We also think that most people would benefit from new allies and Britain would become more democratic.
If we leave the EU as well, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop sharing like data on terrorism and stuff. We can still share that with other countries like America and Australia and any other country that we want to.
Also, trade would not be affected and the economy would not be affected because the EU, by EU law, has to set up trade relations.
We'd be a more democratic country as well, as currently the EU High Court overpowers ours, so there's more things that we can vote for and we can have new laws.
Also, we don't have to let so many people in and buy so much stuff from the EU. 70% of our imports have to come from the EU right now.
Okay, so the Brexiters have made their case. Over to Remain.
So, since about the past year, you've been told that we're going to have a referendum, and you've been bombarded by statistics and facts about money and we'll be richer. And I'm just going to hand over to Madison, but sometimes it's not always true. Okay, so like the Brexit, we do have a lot of different points we want to make. I'm going to start off with prisoners and prisons, just because I want to. We have a lot of people in our jails already. Our jails are full, and we have been sending criminals over to other EU countries to be in their prisons, so we can keep our prisons fairly civilised. If we leave the EU, all those prisoners have to come back because we're not in the EU anymore. And that means that there's going to be a rush and a mad flow of criminals into the UK. And would you like to be in a country knowing that there's so many criminals that you could potentially be in danger? Us leaving the EU is like trying to fix something that's not broken. It's like we've got used to all with being in the EU, and then we're just throwing everything that we've done away and leaving. If we leave, it's like changing everything. As well, it's like leaving a club that you don't agree with, and you're trying to say that I don't agree with you, I'm going to leave. But But if you leave, then you're not going to make it better for other people. You're just going to leave, and that'll be it. You should try and negotiate and try to change things rather than saying I'm going to quit. So now about the NHS. We all rely on the NHS if we're ill or if a family member is ill. The NHS is struggling as it is already. If we leave the EU, our country is going to become poorer, and that is probably going to have a major effect on the NHS. And that could mean that the care people need isn't able to be provided to them in enough time. If we leave the EU, the NHS is going to fall. We're not going to have if something happens in our country, we're not going to be able to rely on all the other countries that are in the EU that could provide us with the help that we need.
Okay, so that's the remainers. So, do we have any questions from the audience? There must be loads of questions. I'm going to ask staff in a minute anyway, so you make sure staff get thinking of questions. Any students want to ask a question? Oh, there's one. Fantastic. Shall we... thank you, Mr. Cheng.
So you were all talking about all the decisions you've made on why we need to leave or stay, but what are the bad things about doing them decisions?
Okay, so what are the bad things about the decisions that you think we should make? So should we go to the Brexiters first?
The things that they said about the prisoners, because we're in the EU, say a foreigner comes over and commits a crime, we have to keep them either here or in an EU country. But if we left the EU, we could send them back to their own country to work trial.
So a bad thing about leaving the EU is our country is going to end up being poorer, and that could lead to a referendum, which you might think, oh, that's not going to affect me, but it is. Prices for things go up, so something that you might have paid a small amount for will go up to more, and that could affect you at home because you might not be getting as much money into your home as you would have been doing before.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Oh, there must be loads. Right, staff, get your thinking hats on because I'm coming for you. Okay, I'm not going to pass the mic. All staff have got loud voices, you can shout it down. Right. Any member of the staff want to ask a question? Ms. Lappin, thank you.
For the Brexit team, okay, other countries who aren't in the EU, in order to trade with EU countries, they still have open borders. Countries like Norway, they still have to do what the Brexit team is saying we'd be able to close our borders, if that makes sense. They still have to have open borders in order to trade with EU. So what do you think we should do about that?
Okay, so Mrs. question is, if we say leave the EU, we still have to have open borders to trade with countries anyway. So, for example, Norway, countries like that are not in the EU, and they still have to have open borders to trade.
I didn't say that we'd have closed borders, I said that we have tighter borders, meaning that we have...
How would you control them?
Well, we'd let in certain trade because there's a lot of stuff which is made in the UK and farmers do a lot of hard work to make stuff, but we're still taking stuff in from the EU, so we don't need to take in half that stuff.
Also, we wouldn't have to trade as much with the EU anyway, because EU law states that we have to sell 70% of our produce to EU countries. If we left the EU, we could trade with other countries like America or China or India more.
But America has said they'll turn you back on you if you come out of the EU. The President of America has specifically said you will be at the back of the queue if you come out of the EU. That's what he said.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrne. A very passionate response from the crowd there.
Do you mean Barack Obama, the president that's on his way out? Donald Trump has already said if he wins, he'll...
Ouch! That hurts me that you would say that he would get in.
Hillary Clinton would let the UK trade with America. She said it as well.
Okay, we'll give the Remainers some comments as well. Anyone?
Come on, Remainers, don't let us out.
I do agree, because the Brexit make it seem like we don't trade with America or China or anywhere else that's out of the EU, but we do. Like the phones that we get, like iPhones, they come from California. We still trade with countries that are out of the EU, but just because if we did leave, and it would seem like we could trade more, sometimes it's made to be like that's not the point really. It's like Brexit would make it seem that we could have more trade if we left the EU, but it's not true.
Okay, thank you for that. Some good questions, great responses. Any other members of staff? Mr. Cheng.
Questions for both sides really. The Brexit team talks a lot about immigration, and we're in a school who's full of lots of people that are either direct immigrants themselves or second generation or third generation. Some people come here as refugees, some people come here to work. My question to the Brexit team is, how can you sit there and say to us that you're going to stop our community moving into the country? And my question to the Remain team is, how can you persuade us that that we have a plan to sort of think about all these additional people who could potentially gain access to the country if we stay?
We're letting people into the country who will benefit our country, and like, if you go to school in our country, the high chance is that you'll do a bit of work here, you'll help our country run better. Like, if you just come to this country, sit there, do nothing, just claim benefits and like hide away, then it's not helping our country in any way possible.
We think that we didn't say that we wouldn't let everybody in, we just said that we're not going to let every single person who wants to come in. We think that they should just let people in who are guaranteed jobs, not just like washing or something like that. They have to have a good solid job or like a visa.
Okay, thank you. Remainers?
We live in a multicultural society, meaning that lots of us have different faiths and beliefs, that we can all get along with each other and learn about each other's religions. The Brexit team is saying that, we're going to leave the EU and we're going to try and stop immigrants from coming to our country. But if we do that, that's like stopping us from blending in together and all coming together as a community.
It seems like a lot of people from Brexit are saying that we have control over everyone. We can tell people what to do. As sort of treat people like cattle almost, and say that we control what you do. You can come in if you've got the right job or the right visa. But some people who come from, say, Syria, who don't have jobs, that need help, that Brexit almost treat them as saying, well, you can't come into this country because you don't have a job. And I think I don't think that's a place that I personally wouldn't want to live in, and I don't think a lot of people would want to live in either.
Yeah, so like Brexit was saying, we want everybody to have a stable job if they're going to come into our country. Yet there's people from our own country who are a British citizen, they don't have a stable job. So you can't say it's one rule for one and not for another.
Okay, well, 10 seconds, Brexit to come back.
Like we said, these refugees, they're not going to sit there and do nothing. They will probably get a job and help our country because we're letting them in. Because they're not lazy, they want to help, and we're helping them, but they're also helping us.
Okay, we'll take one more question. A member of staff, come on staff, there must be some burning issues. Mr. Fox.
Question for Brexit. You talk about all the extra money we'll have to spend, or we could, with your words, to spend on hospitals. The problem is, if we are not letting people into our country, there are a large proportion of people come into this country work in the hospitals. So what's going to happen if we build the hospitals? How are we going to manage to staff them?
And to back that up...
Good question. You might have already heard that over there. So basically, a lot of people who migrate to the UK work in healthcare. So if we stop migration to the country, are we going to have the staff to provide the healthcare that we all deserve in our hospitals?
Just very quickly on that, sir, the government has now just cut funding for NHS nurses. Student nurses, their bursaries, which help them study to learn to become a nurse, has been cut for UK citizens.
Okay, so Mrs. just on the back of that as well, just said the government have just cut bursaries, which are lump sums that trainee healthcare workers get to train to be nurses. Okay, over to you, Brexit.
From what Miss Lappin said, they've cut that because we don't have as much money because we pay this massive lump sum to the EU to stay in the EU, which we could give to the student nurses in the UK.
And what Mr. Fox said, if we're taking in doctors, well, if they're going to help our country and help it run by working at hospitals, we'll let them in then, like I've said to every other point.
We're not just talking about doctors.
Oh, Mr. Fox is coming back at you. Mr. Fox.
We're not just talking about doctors, we're talking about potential nurses and student nurses and the staff who push the trolleys and do all the other unpleasant jobs that maybe people born here don't want to do.
So I think Mr. Fox is saying in any average hospital, only about 15 to 20% of the staff are actually doctors. 80% are not. And they do all the work behind the nurses, the porters, the secretaries and things like that. So the doctors were moved to one side, but what about the rest of the staff?
They can also come into our country, and if they come into our country as well, they can also have an equal wage because our country will be more democratic and we can vote to say how for new laws and say that people should have equal wages on how they work and depending on where they work.
And if we leave the EU, it's not like we're just going to keep everyone out. As long as it's we're not going to just kick every single person out who wants to come in. We just want to control the borders. We never said we'd stop everyone coming in because we need immigration. Because Britain isn't just one set of people, it's many different types of people, which makes up Britain.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fox. Slap in there. So I'm going to give each side now 30 seconds just to wrap up, okay? So we'll start with Remain.
So, if you want a country that is stable financially and a country that isn't going to go into a recession and is going to benefit you when you are older and you get a job, then stay in the EU.
Thank you. Final say. Final say, Brexiters, your last 30 seconds.
If you want to be a freer country and have a say what goes on in Parliament and stuff like that, then you should vote Brexit.
If you want the power to slide to the EU, stay. But if you want power back to the British people, leave.
Okay, I think we should give both sides a huge round of applause. Really good debate, so well done to all of you, and some robust answers there as well that are going back into the audience, so thank you for that. Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes and I just want to share something with you.